to give us his thoughts on where we are in the world, and really this broader question of how can faith communities come together to help create a better world.
Thank you very much. And it's wonderful to be with everybody. And on this very dramatic moment, the first American Pope, the first United States Pope, we had an American, the Pope from the Americas, with Pope Francis, a remarkable pontiff. And now the new Pope just announced, I see that he's taken the name Pope Leo XIV, which is itself very notable, because it was Pope Leo XIII that established the tradition known as the Church's modern social teachings, with the first of the modern encyclicals of 1891 called Rerum Novarum, which is an encyclical about the morality of the new industrial age and what to do about it. And I raise that. I hope the name signifies a continuity of that tradition, because the Church has played a very, very important role on the question of peace. And it has, in its social teachings, been very important and remarkable as one of the few places that reaches the whole world and that speaks on behalf of the whole world. And I would just like to indicate a few cases of that, and then talk about interreligious dialogue more generally. But in 1963, Pope John XXIII issued the encyclical Pacem in Terris, Peace on Earth, in the spring of 1963, in his dying days, actually. And it was inspired and motivated by the Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962. And Pope John XXIII wanted to find a way to support Kennedy and Khrushchev in 1963 to step back from the brink of nuclear war. And the three of them together succeeded, because the encyclical made a big effect both on Khrushchev and Kennedy, and it was followed within a few weeks by the signing of the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. And the Laureum Progressio, also in that same Catholic social teaching tradition. And that is quite notable because it made the link of peace and development. In fact, there's a section of that encyclical that says development is the new name of peace. And it's quite a remarkable statement, because what Pope Paul VI was saying was that poverty and instability breeds conflict, and conflict breeds the risk of global disaster, and that development is therefore the pathway to peace. And this, our next encyclical was Fratelli Tutti in 2019, and that's also very relevant for us, because Pope Francis's core message was dialogue and connection with the other, and no exclusion for our own safety and our own good and our own humanity. And that encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, is dedicated for the first time in the Church's history to a Muslim leader, to the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar. And the encyclical opens with the history of St. Francis of Assisi in the Fifth Crusade, traveling to Egypt and meeting the Sultan Al-Kamil al-Malik on the battlefield of the Fifth Crusade. They spent the night in theological discourse and debate. Neither side converted the other, but in the end, St. Francis was escorted peacefully from the camp, and it showed the encounter of the two great faiths of Christianity and Islam. And Pope Francis wanted to emphasize how crucial dialogue is. one of the great failings in our world in recent years has been almost a complete absence of dialogue. The United States government has not spoken with the Russian government at a senior level until President Trump came in and opened a new dialogue with President Putin. And typically, he was roundly criticized for that. How dare you talk to the other side? In this, President Trump is completely correct. It was Biden who refused to have diplomacy with Putin after February 22nd, 2022, 24th, 2022. And this was a great failing because the war in Ukraine not only continued uselessly, but brought us to the brink of nuclear war, especially in the fall of 2022. And not less today, because this war remains not only very costly in lives and in destruction, but extraordinarily dangerous till this moment. It can absolutely spiral out of control. Well, I think the spirit of interreligious communion for peace is essentially about dialogue across faiths and mutual respect across faiths. And this is a very hard thing to achieve, but we have leaders that are committed to it. Our new Pope, we trust, is committed to helping to lead in this line. I don't know him personally, but he is described as being in the Augustinian tradition and the tradition of community and the tradition of Pope Francis's pastoral approach, which is very, very promising. We have profound failures right now of dialogue that are catastrophic in several areas, in Ukraine, in the Middle East, in India and Pakistan, and in the Far East, where the United States has talked openly of war with China, which is a mind-bogglingly wrong-headed, dangerous, one would think surrealistic, but all too realistic discussion in Washington. And in my view and my experience, since I know both sides of every one of these conflicts pretty well, it is the failure of dialogue that is the most fundamental problem. In conflicts, there are legitimate concerns on both sides, but there's always demonization of one side by the other side, and always the claim there's no one to talk to on the other side, there's no one to make peace with on the other side, and at least extremists on both sides claim that we're inevitably in a spiral of death, yes, and that there's no alternative but to fight to win. And this is always wrong. If you know both sides of a conflict, you understand that this needs a very different kind of solution from war. Everywhere needs mutual understanding, mutual respect, a legitimate turn to solutions. All wars, in my view, as Clausewitz said famously, are politics with other means, and the only solution to politics is politics. It's not, and so there is no solution to Ukraine except for mutual security of Ukraine and Russia, and I underscore mutual because both sides have true security concerns, not just Ukraine, but also Russia, which we have deliberately ignored. When it comes to the Palestinian question, there is no doubt that the only solution is Palestinian self-determination and political rights, and that has been denied by the Israeli side. And until there is dialogue and mutual respect, there will never be peace in the Middle East. And my view is there needs to be a state of Palestine, welcomed in the two-state solution immediately. And the United States has been the only veto of that solution in the last decades. When it comes to India and Pakistan, they don't even talk with each other. And they would both have so much benefit in economic development, in security, safety, addressing ecological crises in the Himalayas, in the watersheds that they share together, if they actually opened up dialogue. And when it comes to the East Asian crisis of the US and China, I would just share my own view based on travels of, I'm sure, well over 100 trips to China during the last 41 years, that China is no enemy of the United States, no threat to the United States, and no reason for conflict between the two countries, other than the false mindset of who's number one, which is the most ridiculous, absurd, uninteresting, and doomed to fail question of humanity. It's not even a meaningful idea. It's not a meaningful concept. It's not a measurable concept. What we want is decent life for everybody, not who's number one, which means nothing. So all of this is to say that the concept of dialogue and mutual respect is the key, and religious leaders should be in the forefront of that. I hope and trust that the new Pope will be. I know that the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, speaks that language. I know that the Patriarch of the Greek Patriarch Bartholomew is one of the great leaders for ecumenism and for interreligious dialogue and understanding. And our job is to help promote that everywhere and call on the religious leaders to play their role in not only helping their own congregants to understand the stakes, but to help the ones who probably need the education the most, our politicians, to understand the stakes. We're in the hands of politicians that don't necessarily know very much about these issues, but they have the power